but something that is interactive with the folks that are closest to where the action is taking place.
Reprise du débat. Resuming debate, the honourable member from Regina, Wisconsin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak to Bill C-317, an act to establish a national strategy respecting flood and drought forecasting. And I'd like to thank my colleague, the honourable member for Lac St. Louis, for introducing this bill. And I have to say that I enjoy working with him on the House of Commons Standing Committee for Environment and Sustainable Development. This bill covers some very interesting topics, including advanced flood and drought forecasting models, sophisticated integration of spatially detailed hydrological management models and water resource management models, supercomputers with inputs from multiple meteorological forecast models, and on-site observations of rainfall, soil moisture, snowpacks, glaciers, lake levels, and ice jams and stream flows. So there's certainly a lot of state-of-the-art technologies and subjects to consider in Bill C-317. Typically, when I debate a bill in Parliament, I often put the bill into one of two categories: good bills that I encourage all MPs to support, and bad bills that I encourage all MPs to oppose. After reading Bill C-317, it seems that this bill falls somewhere between those two extremes. Therefore, I think it would be prudent to support this bill at second reading so that it can be further studied at committee. Mr. Speaker, floods have been around since the beginning of time, and property damage caused by flooding has been around for almost as long. Whenever a major flood occurs, once all of the people have been safely evacuated, and once the flood waters recede, the discussion soon turns to the cost of the flood in terms of property damage. Inevitably, the question is asked, who will pay for the damaged or destroyed property? Unfortunately, far too often, it is different levels of government that have to step in to provide financial assistance. In fact, the federal government's Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program has spent approximately $8 billion in compensation since the program was established in the 1970s. Furthermore, the frequency and the amounts of future payouts are expected to increase as more and more properties of ever-increasing values continue to be built on lakefronts and riverfronts. While I have no doubt that the federal government's Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program was set up with good intentions, one has to remember that all of the costs of the program are inevitably passed on to taxpayers. I've often wondered, why is it that different levels of government have to incur these costs? Why isn't this something that is best left to private sector insurance companies? In fact, I was so curious that I sat down and had this very conversation with representatives from the Insurance Brokers Association of Saskatchewan. It turns out that insurance markets function very well when there is a high level of predictability in which the insurance companies and their policyholders can operate. If insurance companies and their actuaries can predict with a reasonable level of accuracy that in any given year, so many houses will be destroyed by lightning strikes, and so many more will be destroyed by fires, and so many more will be destroyed by some other type of disaster, then insurance companies can develop their policies and set their premiums accordingly. Unfortunately, it seems that insurance companies have considerably more difficulty in predicting flooding than they do in predicting other types of disasters, such as fires or lightning strikes. As a result, they simply do not offer flood insurance to many Canadian homeowners. And when those homes get damaged or destroyed by floods, government programs, such as the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program, get activated, and it is taxpayers who are ultimately left paying the bill. Clearly, there is room for improvement. There has to be a better way to structure the federal government's policy than to have the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program, as well as similar provincial programs, simply dole out billions of dollars to uninsured property owners whenever there is a flood. In fact, these sentiments were echoed in the final report of the Expert Advisory Panel on the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement, which was presented to the Minister of Emergency Preparedness in November of last year. One line in particular from the report's executive summary describes the path forward very succinctly. Quote, "The panel recommends the Government of Canada develop tools, information, and capabilities to support risk-informed decision-making by all levels of government, Indigenous communities, the private and not-for-profit sectors, academia, and the public at large," unquote. Mr. Speaker, I feel that the term risk-informed decision-making is very appropriate. If you have a floodplain right beside a river that is likely to overflow, it makes sense that builders be informed of this risk before they build. It makes sense that municipal and provincial governments be informed of this risk before they grant the building permits. And it makes sense that potential home buyers be informed of this risk and the associated insurance premiums before they buy. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the way forward lies in Bill C-317. If the federal government could step in and play a useful role in providing standardized, accurate flood mapping and flood forecasting information in order to facilitate an orderly marketplace for flood insurance for property owners, this would be a beneficial role for the federal government to play. If this flood information were accurate and reliable and stored in a database that were easily accessible to the public and easily accessible to insurance companies, then a significant element of uncertainty in the marketplace could be reduced. Many private sector insurance companies would then be more willing to offer insurance policies to Canadian homeowners. And when a flood inevitably happens at some point in the future, property owners would no longer fill out government forms to receive compensation. They would simply fill out an insurance claim with the private sector insurance company that sold them their policy. This approach would represent a major cost savings for the federal government and for taxpayers. If one considers the cost of establishing and maintaining a standard database for flood mapping and flood forecasting, I think it is very reasonable to believe that this cost would be tiny compared to the billions of dollars of payouts that the federal government has made and will continue to make through the present Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program. Mr. Speaker, for the vast majority of Canadians, the most valuable asset they will ever own is their home. So it makes sense that as many Canadian homeowners as possible should have an insurance policy on their home that includes losses from flooding. With a properly functioning insurance market, perhaps over time, the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement Program could be wound down, and taxpayers would no longer be on the hook whenever there is a flood. In conclusion, sometimes the invisible hand of the market needs the helping hand of government. The need for accurate flood mapping and flood forecasting in the marketplace for flood insurance may be one of those times. Again, I would like to thank my colleague, the Honourable Member for Lac-St. Louis, for introducing this bill, and I look forward to studying this bill in more detail at the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.